Trust isn't lost in one grand betrayal. It slips away in quiet moments, like when your wife won't let go of her damn phone. My name's Mason Peterson, 52, private investigator. I find the truth for a living, but I never thought I'd have to do it in my own house. Spent my life figuring out where people go when they don't want to be found, what they do when they think no one's watching. My instincts have kept me alive, kept me sharp. But marriage, that's where a man lets his guard down. Emma and I had been together for over 20 years. Not perfect, but we had a rhythm. She used to say we were a team. Lately, it felt like I was carrying all the weight while she was off somewhere else in her head. It wasn't just the distance, it was the little things. A hesitation before answering simple questions. A faint smile at nothing when she thought I wasn't looking. A new perfume I never smelled on her before. Then there was the phone. We never had a house full of secrets. Our phones sat out on the counter, unlocked, because there was never a reason to worry. But then, one night, Emma started taking hers everywhere. Into the bathroom, out to the garage to check the laundry, face down on the nightstand. I noticed, but I didn't say anything. Not yet. You don't tip your hand until you know the game. Everything good? I asked one evening as she stood by the sink, staring at her screen, thumb hovering over the glass like she was debating something. She flinched, just barely. Then she clicked the phone off and set it down, too carefully, like placing a grenade. Yeah, just work stuff. Since when do antique dealers have urgent business at 9 at night? She sighed, annoyed now, like I was the one acting strange. Some of us like to keep in touch with people, Mason. I let it go, but my gut twisted. She was hiding something. And if there was one thing I learned in this line of work, it's that people don't hide good news. Over the next few weeks, I watched. Not obvious, just little things. She was dressing a little different, more thought put into it. Like she was picking outfits instead of just throwing something on. More time on her hair. A little makeup, even on lazy weekends. Women don't do that for no reason. Then came the slip. We were having dinner at Donovan's, a steak place just outside town. Nothing fancy, but good food, quiet. I was halfway through a ribeye when she said it. I was talking with Hunter the other day and I stopped chewing. Hunter. She blinked, fork poised in midair. Oh, yeah, Hunter. Just a guy who comes into the shop sometimes. He was telling me about. I didn't hear the rest. My mind was stuck on just a guy. A name I'd never heard before, spoken too casually, like she was trying to smooth it over. I didn't call her on it. Not yet. The best way to catch a liar is to let them keep talking. Back home, she went upstairs early. Said she had a headache. I poured myself a whiskey and sat in my chair, the old leather creaking beneath me. I watched the staircase where she disappeared, running the name over in my head. Hunter. A man who was on her mind enough to slip out mid-conversation. A man she didn't think I needed to know about. I wasn't going to jump to conclusions. That's how idiots end up looking like fools. But I also wasn't going to sit back and wait to be played. The next morning, I went to work, not on a case, but on my own life. There's a certain irony in being a private investigator and not knowing what's happening under your own roof. But when you're looking for something, really looking, the cracks show fast. I checked our phone bill first. Nothing fancy, just pulled it up online while I sipped my coffee. There it was. The same number, repeated over and over. Late at night. Early in the morning. Hours of calls. My chest went cold. I copied the number down and ran it through a search. Took all of 10 minutes to get a name. Hunter Robinson. The name meant nothing to me, but I'd make sure that changed. I dug deeper. 45. Divorced. Owned a little bookstore downtown. A romantic type, probably one of those guys who quoted poetry to women who should know better. I parked a block down from the shop that afternoon, took my time. Didn't go in. Just watched. He came out around 4, locking up early. Slim build, graying beard, 2 soft hands for real work. He looked like the kind of guy who smiled a lot, the kind that women call sweet, when they don't see what's behind it. He walked to his car, a clean silver sedan, and pulled out his phone before even getting in. I already knew who he was calling. I had everything I needed. But instead of feeling sick, I felt something else, calm. Because now, I controlled the next move. I didn't make a move right away. The worst thing a man can do when he's holding a loaded gun is fire too soon. I wanted to see how deep this went, how much rope they'd give me to hang them with. So I waited. Watched. Emma's pattern shifted, subtle at first. A few more errands than usual. A late lunch with a friend from college she never mentioned before. Even the way she carried herself changed, lighter, distracted, like a teenager sneaking around with a crush. It would have been embarrassing if it weren't my marriage she was walking all over. I tailed her once, just to see. She left the house around 3, said she had a supply run for the shop. I followed at a distance, my old truck blending in well enough with town traffic. She didn't go to any antique supplier. Instead, she drove straight to Robinson's bookstore and parked around the back, where fewer eyes would see. She sat in the car for a minute, checking her phone. Then she got out, smoothed her sweater, checked her hair in the side mirror. I felt my jaw tighten. I knew what was coming before she even touched the handle of that back door, before she stepped inside like she belonged there. I let out a breath. This was real. I could have confronted her then, busted through the door, and laid it all out. But where's the satisfaction in that? She was expecting to get away with it, to keep sneaking around while I sat at home playing the fool. I'd let her believe it a little longer. Let her lie to my face again, just to see if she had the stomach for it. That night, she made pasta and opened a bottle of wine, a nice one we'd been saving. Probably for a real occasion, not whatever this was. She set the plates down and gave me a soft smile, like she was actually trying. "Long day?" she asked, sitting across from me. I took a sip of my drink, set the glass down slow. "You could say that." She twirled her fork through the spaghetti. "Anything interesting?" I almost laughed. "Nothing worth talking about." She nodded, her shoulders relaxing just a little. Whatever guilt she might have felt, she had tucked it away, neat and out of sight. I wondered if she even realized she was doing it. The next morning, I went to work. If she was going to lie, she deserved to be caught properly. First step was locking down the evidence. I copied phone records, pulled up old messages she thought she'd deleted. Not that she said much, Emma was careful. But she wasn't careful enough to stop Robinson from slipping up. "D. Yesterday was incredible. I can't stop thinking about you." "E. Me too. We have to be careful." "D. I don't care. I just want you." I sat back, my fingers tapping against the desk. They weren't just meeting. They weren't just talking. This wasn't some emotional thing she could excuse later. This was physical. The next step was getting proof that would actually stick. I wasn't about to go around town saying my wife was cheating without something solid. I'd seen enough divorce cases to know how fast a liar could turn the tables. So I installed a small GPS tracker under her car. Nothing fancy, just enough to tell me where she was going when she wasn't home. It didn't take long to pay off. 2 days later, her location popped up at a motel on the edge of town. Not exactly the kind of place you go for lunch with a book club. I drove out there, kept my distance. The parking lot was half empty, but I spotted her car right away, tucked in the back. Robinson's was parked beside it. I didn't move, didn't storm in, didn't call. Just waited. It didn't take long before the door opened, and there they were. Emma stepped out first, brushing her hair back, adjusting her clothes. Robinson followed, looking pleased with himself, like a dog that just got a treat. I clenched the steering wheel. I'd seen a lot in my line of work. Liars, cheaters, backstabbers. But nothing ever quite prepares you for seeing your own wife walk out of a motel room with another man. I took a picture. One clear shot, time-stamped, undeniable. Then I drove home, because I wasn't done yet. Catching them was one thing. Making them pay? That was something else entirely. I didn't sleep that night. Not because I was angry. Anger's easy. It burns hot, fast, and leaves you tired. What I felt was colder. Calculating. The kind of clarity that only comes when you know exactly what needs to be done. I sat at the kitchen table, phone in hand, scrolling through options. There were a lot of ways to ruin a man. Financially, socially, professionally. The trick was choosing the one that hurt the most. Robinson had built a reputation in this town. The kind of man who leaned into the hopeless romantic image, old books, soft music, poetic nonsense. Women swooned over that kind of thing, especially the ones looking for an escape from real life. The irony was, he wasn't special. Just another small-town creep looking for attention in all the wrong places. He had a type too. Married women. I did a little digging and found out Emma wasn't the first. That was useful. By sunrise, I had a plan. I made a few calls, starting with a guy I knew in media. Nothing national, just a popular podcast that covered small-town scandals. The kind that spread fast, where people didn't care about legalities, just juicy details. I laid it all out for them. The affair. The pattern. The evidence. Names redacted for now. But they bit hard. Next, I reached out to a few local contacts. Old clients. A friend who ran a real estate office, someone who knew half the town. I slipped them some of the details, just enough to plant the seed. The town would do the rest. Emma left that morning like nothing had changed. Same routine. Same kiss on the cheek. I let her go, knowing damn well the world was already shifting under her feet. By noon, the podcast episode had dropped. The bookstore Casanova, a small-town affair exposed. People ate it up. You could hear the excitement in the host's voice, the kind of glee that came from airing out someone else's dirty laundry. I listened while I drank my coffee. Folks, this is the kind of story that makes you shake your head. A married woman, long time, respected, steps out on her husband. And get this, she's not the first. This guy, this so-called hopeless romantic, running that quaint little bookstore downtown? Yeah, he's got a habit. He's not in love, he's got a damn hobby. It was brutal. I didn't have to do anything else. By the time I walked into town later that day, people were already whispering. The ladies at the coffee shop. The group of old men outside the hardware store. I passed a young couple, the woman pulling up the podcast on her phone while the husband shook his head. By 3 o'clock, Robinson knew. I was sitting at Joe's diner when he came in, his usual easy smile replaced with something tight, uneasy. He scanned the room, like he could feel the weight of every set of eyes on him. He walked to the counter, asked for coffee, voice clipped. Joe, an old friend, poured the cup slow. Hell of a podcast today, he mused. Robinson didn't answer. He left his coffee untouched. I smiled to myself. That night, Emma came home quiet. No small talk, no easy smiles. I sat in my chair, flipping through an old case file, waiting. She lasted maybe 10 minutes before breaking. Mason. I turned the page. She shifted her weight. Something weird happened today. I looked up, met her eyes. Weird how? She hesitated. I don't know. Just, have you heard anything? About town. I let that hang in the air. Then I set the file down, stretched, and stood. I walked past her toward the kitchen, poured myself a drink. Took my time. When I turned back, she was still standing there, arms crossed tight, the first signs of real worry in her eyes. People are talking, she said. About a podcast. About affairs. I interrupted, taking a slow sip. Yeah, heard something about that. Her face paled. Mason. I held up a hand. Don't. Not yet. I set the glass down, leveled my gaze at her. You'll get your turn, Emma. But first, let's see how this plays out. I walked past her, not bothering to look back. Let her sit with it. Let her wonder just how much I knew. She had no idea that I was just getting started. Emma barely slept that night. I could hear her tossing, shifting under the covers, her breathing too quick, too shallow. She didn't say anything, though. Not yet. Maybe she thought if she ignored it long enough, it would go away. That's the thing about people like her. They only start panicking when they know they're losing. By morning, I already knew what was coming. It started with the texts, the quick glances at her phone, the way her hand shook just slightly when she put it down. A few hours later, the call came. I sat in my chair, coffee in hand, watching her from across the room as she answered. Hello. Her voice was too even, too careful. A pause. What? No, I haven't. I don't. She turned away slightly, lowering her voice, as if I wasn't already hearing every word. Hunter, just calm down, okay? I don't know who. What do you mean people are saying my name? Who? Who's talking? She started pacing, one hand running through her hair, her nails tapping against the phone case. Her back was to me now, but I could see the tension in her shoulders. I can't talk about this right now. I have to go. She ended the call, exhaled, then turned. I met her eyes. Took a slow sip of my coffee. Didn't say a word. She swallowed. That was Hunter. I finished for her. Her face twitched, just a little. Mason, Sit down, I said. She hesitated, then crossed the room slowly, lowering herself into the chair across from me. She folded her hands, trying to steady them, her wedding ring flashing under the kitchen light. It should have meant something. It didn't. I set my mug down, leaned forward. So, how long? She opened her mouth, closed it, exhaled. Mason, How long? A pause. Then, finally, a whisper. A few months. I nodded, my jaw tightening. Months. While she sat across from me at the dinner table, while she kissed my cheek before leaving for her errands, while she smiled at me like nothing had changed. I stood, pushing my chair back slow. Get dressed. She blinked. What? I grabbed my keys. You heard me. Get dressed. She hesitated, searching my face, trying to figure out if I was about to lose it. When she didn't move, I spoke again, quieter this time. Emma, I swear to God, if I have to say it a third time, you won't like the tone I use. That got her moving. 20 minutes later, we pulled into Donovan's Steakhouse, the same place we'd gone for dinner just weeks ago, back when I first heard Robinson's name slip out of her mouth. Full circle. I got out, walked inside without waiting for her. The hostess recognized me, smiling politely. Table for two? No. I'm meeting someone. She nodded and led me to a booth in the back, tucked away from the main crowd. Robinson was already there, hunched over a glass of water, looking like a man who hadn't had a good day in his life. He looked up as I approached, his eyes flicking behind me as Emma walked in. "Oh, hell," he muttered. I slid into the seat across from him, motioning for Emma to sit beside me. She did, stiff, silent. Robinson exhaled, rubbing a hand over his jaw. "Mason, listen, I don't know what you think is." I reached into my jacket and pulled out my phone, placing it on the table between us. His mouth snapped shut. I hit play. A voice crackled through the speaker, his own, from one of the messages he'd sent Emma. "I don't care. I just want you." Silence. I leaned back, watching him. "Bad habit, Hunter. Texting things that come back to bite you." His face went pale. Emma shifted beside me, staring at the screen like she could will the words away. I took my time, rolling my shoulders, letting the weight of it all settle in. Here's the thing. I don't care about apologies. I don't care about excuses. I care about consequences. Robinson swallowed. "Mason, come on. Let's not. You like stories, don't you?" I cut in. "Being a bookstore owner and all. I got a good one for you." I drummed my fingers against the table. Once upon a time, there was a man who thought he was untouchable. Thought he could slither into another man's house, take what wasn't his, and walk away clean. I leaned forward. "You want to know how that story ends?" He didn't answer. I smiled, just a little. "It ends with him losing everything." He exhaled sharply. "Mason, please, just..." I'd shut up if I were you. I pulled a folded envelope from my pocket and tossed it onto the table. It slid across the smooth surface, stopping inches from his hand. His eyes flicked to it. "What's this?" "Reality." He hesitated, then slowly reached for it. He unfolded the paper, scanned the contents, and his hands started to shake. I watched his face carefully, the way the color drained from his skin. "See, Hunter, when you make a career out of knowing people's dirt, it's not hard to find a little of your own." I nodded at the paper. "Turns out your little hobby? Not so harmless. You've got receipts, a pattern. A few names that might interest certain folks. Wives who didn't take too kindly to the truth." His throat bobbed. I leaned back. "You got two choices. You pack up and leave town before the week is out. Or I take this file to every news outlet, law office, and pissed-off husband within a 50-mile radius." Emma turned to me, her voice shaking. "Mason, this is too much." I didn't even look at her. "You lost your vote when you walked into that motel." Robinson ran a hand through his hair, his breath shaky. "Jesus Christ." I slid out of the booth, standing slow. "Tick-tock, Hunter." He didn't say anything, just sat there, gripping that envelope like it might strangle him. Emma stared at me, eyes wide, lips parted like she had something else to say. I walked away before she could say it. The first piece of the board had fallen. The next one? That was Emma's to deal with. Emma stayed quiet for a few days after that dinner. No pleading, no yelling, just a hollow sort of silence. I think she knew there was no coming back from it, that whatever version of us she'd been clinging to was already gone. I went about my business. Work didn't stop just because my marriage was in the gutter. People still needed to find things, find people, get answers they couldn't get on their own. That's what I was good at. I was sitting in my office when the text came in. "Can we talk?" I stared at it for a second, then typed back. "Talk." 2 minutes later, she walked through my door. She looked tired. Not in the way someone looks after a bad night's sleep, but in the way someone looks when they've run out of road. She hesitated just inside, glancing around like she hadn't been in here 100 times before. I gestured to the chair across from me. "Might as well sit." She did. Smoothed her skirt, folded her hands like she was gathering herself. "I'm leaving," she said finally. I nodded, leaning back. "All right." That threw her. I could see it in the slight pull of her brows. Maybe she expected a fight, one last argument, one last chance for her to make a case. She cleared her throat. I thought about asking for the house, but I don't think I could stand living there now. Would have been a waste of time, I said. "You're not getting it." Her jaw tightened, but she didn't argue. I need to get away for a while. Maybe stay with my sister. I shrugged. Do what you want, Emma. She exhaled slowly, rubbing at her temple. I know you hate me. Hate takes too much effort. I took a sip of my coffee, set it back down. I'm just done. Silence stretched between us, heavy and final. She searched my face for something, but whatever it was, she didn't find it. After a moment, she nodded. Stood. Goodbye, Mason. I didn't answer. She left, and that was that. I should have felt something watching her go. Maybe I did, somewhere deep down. But mostly, I just felt lighter. Like I'd been carrying dead weight for too damn long and finally set it down. The next few weeks were quiet. I sold the house. Kept it simple, called up a realtor I trusted, had it off my hands before I had time to second guess. I moved into an apartment on the edge of town. Nothing fancy, just enough space to put my boots up at the end of the day. One evening, I was at the hardware store picking up some things when I ran into Giselle Hayes. Tall, sharp-eyed, no nonsense. Ran a ranch on the outskirts. We'd crossed paths before, but never for long. She smirked when she saw me. Heard you had yourself a hell of a month. I grabbed a bag of nails off the shelf. That what they're saying? She shrugged. Some say you lost a wife. Others say you just cleaned house. I huffed a laugh. Depends on how you look at it. She leaned against the shelf. So what now? I thought about it. About the empty house that wasn't mine anymore. About the business that kept rolling forward. About the new silence in my life that didn't feel all that bad. Now, I said, I move on. She nodded. I steady. Good answer. I watched her go, then tossed the bag of nails in my cart. No rush. No expectations. Just life rolling forward, exactly the way it should. Time had a way of settling things, whether you wanted it to or not. Emma left town like she said she would. Last I heard, she was staying with her sister a few states over, trying to find herself. Maybe she would, maybe she wouldn't. Either way, it wasn't my problem anymore. Robinson didn't make it a week before packing up and closing his shop. The bookstore went under quick, turns out. Being known as the town's favorite homewrecker isn't great for business. People stopped showing up, and the few who did weren't there for books. They were there to stare, to whisper, to remind him that no one had forgotten. He left town one night, no announcements, no goodbyes. Just disappeared like a bad memory. I moved on in my own way. Took more cases. Kept busy. I'd never been much for downtime, and I wasn't about to start now. One night, I was sitting in my office, finishing up paperwork, when my phone buzzed. An unknown number. I stared at it for a second before answering. Mason Peterson. A pause, then a voice I hadn't heard in a long time. Hey, Dad. I straightened in my chair, my hand tightening around the phone. Connor. Yeah. A breath, then. Hope it's not weird, I called. I shook my head, even though he couldn't see it. Not weird. Just unexpected. He chuckled softly, that same low laugh I remembered from when he was a kid. Guess that's fair. I leaned back, running a hand over my jaw. How you been? Good. Colleges. Well, it's college. Keeps me busy. I nodded to myself. That's good. Silence stretched between us. Not awkward, just cautious. Like two men stepping back onto the same road after years apart, both wondering if it would hold their weight. He cleared his throat. Listen, I heard about what happened. With Mom. Of course he had. News like that moved faster than wildfire. Yeah, I don't really know what to say. I sighed, rubbing at the bridge of my nose. Then don't say anything. Another pause. Then, quieter, are you okay? I let the question sit there. Was I? A few months ago, I might have said no. But now, sitting in my office, my life my own again, I realized the answer was different. Yeah, I said finally. I am. He exhaled, like he'd been holding on to something too tight. Good. I didn't push for more. Didn't ask why he called or what he wanted. He'd made the first move. That was enough. We talked for a little while longer. Nothing heavy. Just small things. Things that felt normal. Before he hung up, he hesitated. Maybe next time I'm back, we can grab a beer. I smiled, just a little. I'd like that. When I hung up, I sat there for a moment, staring at the phone. Then I got up, grabbed my jacket, and headed out. The night was cool, the town quiet, the weight on my shoulders lighter than it had been in years. I walked down to the diner, slid into my usual booth, and nodded at the waitress. The usual? She asked. Yeah. And a coffee. As she walked off, I glanced up and saw Giselle Hayes leaning against the counter, arms crossed, smirking at me like she knew something I didn't. I raised a brow. What? She shrugged. Just wondering if you finally got all that mess out of your system. I huffed a laugh. Most of it. She tilted her head. And the rest? I picked up my coffee, took a slow sip. Guess we'll find out. She nodded, her smirk widening just a bit. Then she turned, tossing a casual, "See you around, Peterson," over her shoulder as she walked out the door. I watched her go, then settled back in my seat. No rush. No expectations. Just life, rolling forward. And for the first time in a long time, I was looking forward to it. A year changes a man, whether he wants it to or not. Emma was gone, out of my life for good. She tried reaching out once, some long-winded email about regrets and reflections, how she'd made mistakes but hoped I could understand. I didn't read past the second paragraph. Some things don't deserve closure. Some things just end. Robinson never came back. Heard he tried setting up shop a few towns over, but men like him don't start fresh. They just drag their mess to a new zip code. I had no doubt he'd find his way into another situation just like the last one, and next time, maybe the husband wouldn't be so polite about it. I stayed in Cedar Ridge. Sold the house, set up a new office in a better part of town, one where people actually paid on time. Started doing more work pro bono for kids in trouble, runaways, missing persons, cases no one else wanted to deal with. Something about helping people who actually needed it made up for all the years I spent dealing with scumbags. I couldn't fix everything, but I could do something. That was enough. One day, I was sitting at the diner, coffee in hand, watching the world go by when my phone rang. I glanced at the screen. Connor. I let it ring twice, just long enough to remind him I wasn't the kind of man who jumped at a call. Then I picked up. Hey, Dad. He sounded better than last time. More sure of himself. You got time? I glanced around the diner. Same people, same conversations, same rhythm of life I'd finally settled into. Yeah. What's up? I'm coming through town next week. Thought maybe we could grab that beer. I smirked. Long overdue. He hesitated, then quieter, looking forward to it. I nodded, even though he couldn't see me. Me too, kid. After I hung up, I sat there for a moment, letting it sink in. No wait, no anger, just clarity. The door swung open, and Giselle Hayes strolled in, dust on her boots, hair tied back like she'd been working since dawn. She saw me, raised a brow. Peterson. I tipped my coffee at her. Hayes. She pulled up a chair without asking. Got a job for you. I smirked. Yeah. She leaned in, resting her elbows on the table. I need a guy who knows how to handle himself. Someone with sharp instincts, doesn't back down easy. I took a slow sip of my coffee, letting the moment stretch. Sounds like you're describing me. She grinned. Maybe I am. I set my cup down, tapping a finger against the rim. What's the pay? She shrugged. Dinner. Maybe a drink after. I studied her for a second. Then I nodded. All right. You got yourself a deal. She stood, tossed a few bills on the table for her coffee. Pick me up at 7. I watched her go, that same slow smirk tugging at my lips. No rush. No expectations. Just life, rolling forward. And this time, I was damn well enjoying the ride.